Welcome everyone to Introduction of Birding. I'm joined with, my name is Kristen Barker. I'm the Community Education Coordinator here at the Garden, and I'm joined by Tina Stoner, who is the president of the Pomona Valley Audubon Society, and she's going to be leading us through this introductory class to getting started bird watching, which I am very excited to jump into. But before I hand it over to her, I just wanted to go over the format of the class a little bit. As a webinar, I encourage you all to use the chat, which we've got started. I mentioned that, if you want everyone to see what you're typing into the chat, make your selection to show panelists and attendees, not just panelists. If you want everyone in the class to see what you're typing in there. I also encourage you to use the Q&A feature of the chat. If you have any questions for Tina, we'll be able to pause kind of periodically before we move on to the next topic to address a few of your questions. But don't worry if it doesn't get addressed right away. We'll have time at the end definitely to go over those questions. And then also we are recording this. So if if there's something that you want to rewatch, or before you go out birding next time, you want a little refresher, you'll be able to find the video recording on the digital content page of our website, which is calbg.org. And I typically am able to have that up by the end of the day on Monday, if not sooner. So you'll be able to find that there. And lastly, Tina I'm going to be mentioning a lot of references, and she has sent me a list of reference materials that I will send to all of you in a follow-up email. So, if you're taking notes, don't worry if you don't get the name perfectly written down right. You'll have that in a follow-up email from me after the class. So you'll have that provided to you.
Yeah, especially websites, they all will include active links, so you don't have to be trying to write down www. whatever.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
It's a little bit easier. Yeah.
Exactly. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Tina. Tina, as I mentioned, is the president of the Pomona Valley Audubon Society, which is our local chapter here. You may have seen her, if you're a local to this area, you may have seen her and many other volunteers at many community events, like as Earth Day here in Claremont in the Village, or Village Venture, or the events we have here at the Garden, like things that go bump in the night, and our annual Bird Fest, which we are not able to have this year. And so we're providing lots of great bird-friendly activities and classes like this one today. And so I'm very much looking forward to getting started and handing you over to Tina. I myself am just getting into birding, so this is going to be great. I'm very much looking forward to it. So with that, I'd like to hand you over to Tina. Thank you for being here.
Okay, well, thank you, Kristen, very much. Thank you to the Gardens. Pomona Valley Audubon has always been a part of the Family Bird Festival, and I was concerned about our lack of participation this year. And so thank you for inviting me to do this class. And I'm glad we're able to support Bird Month at the Garden as kind of a substitute for the Family Bird Festival. That's just great. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we hope to accomplish today. Our objectives for this class are pretty straightforward. I hope to open your eyes to the wonderful world of birds and birding. I hope that you learned something new today. And don't worry about writing everything down, because you'll have a list of new things to learn in that resource document, that handout that Kristen will email you later. And I hope to give you enough information that after this simple 1-hour class that you say to yourself, I can do this. This is something that I can do. And that it sparks that little bit of interest and encourages you to actually get outdoors, find some birds, and have some fun, because that's really what it's all about. So why birding? Why is bird watching? Why is birding so popular? Did you know that birding is actually America's #1 spectator sport? And that it's America's #2 outdoor activity, second only to gardening. And it's also super popular. If you do if you go to Amazon and you Google, or search rather, bird field guides, you're going to get thousands of results, just thousands of results. Now, I like to think of birding as a unique window to nature. Why? Because birds are one of the few wild animals that we can find almost anywhere, from the inner city to the wilderness areas. And because of that, they can be enjoyed anywhere, anytime, with others or alone, day or night. Think about owling in the evenings. You can see birds in your own yard. You can get involved at any level of involvement that suits you at your own pace, and you can even do it during a pandemic. Now, if that doesn't make birding appealing, I don't know what does. What I like is that it gets you outdoors and it connects you to nature, whether it's the feeder in your backyard or a field trip to a local park or even an exotic international bird travel trip. Whatever it is, it's going to get you closer to nature. And that's what I like about birding the most, I think. Interest in birds and birding has skyrocketed since the stay-at-home orders. And people have slowed down and they've tuned into nature as a result of those stay-at-home orders. And they're beginning to enjoy the nature around them even more. Birding is even considered a mindfulness practice. Yeah, it reduces your stress. I mean, birding is physically good for you. That's another good reason to bird. Another way that birding connects you to nature is it increases your awareness of the seasons. Now, those of you that might be tuning in from out of state, you might know about raking leaves and shoveling snow, but here in Southern California, we don't have those kinds of changes in seasons that are as obvious. They're very subtle. So when I think about the seasonal changes in Southern California, and I think about bird migration in the spring and in the fall, and I think about nesting season, it makes me more in tune with those cycles of nature that I might miss otherwise. One of the cool things about birding, I think, also is the thrill of discovery. When you identify a bird all by yourself for the first time on your own, there is almost a childlike sense of discovery that occurs that just is a wonderful feeling. It's kind of like the thrill of solving a mystery, you know. And birds will challenge you to see new things every single day. So you're always learning. There's initial low cost when it comes to learning birding. For some activities, there are very expensive lessons that have to be taken. But for the cost of a decent pair of binoculars and a field guide, you're pretty much ready to go. Most of the training is free or very low cost. And that includes like your local Audubon chapters, your local parks, bird refuges, nature centers, botanic gardens, like California Botanic Garden, and your wild bird type stores often offer free bird walks that you can join on and learn. And that's the best way to learn, is to learn with others. I know we can't do it right now, but that is the best way to learn. There are also multiple online sources for learning about birding, and those, of course, are all free as well, or some are very low cost. Citizen science. Now, here's something that people don't always associate with birding. You have an opportunity to make a difference. The data that you collect now will affect future generations by informing both conservation and development decisions that are made. And of course, the amazing friendships and camaraderie that come with getting involved with a group of birders, I think, is just, one of the best arguments for birding all along. Some of my best friends are birders, and it's very wonderful to share that common interest, and it's amazing the friendships that blossom as a result of that. All right, so what are we going to discuss today? Well, we're going to explore the tools of the trade, and that means primarily optics, things like your binoculars, spotting scopes, and cameras. We're going to talk about field guides, both the physical field guides and the electronic field guides that are available. We're going to talk a little bit about keeping records, and then we're going to dive into the 4 keys of bird identification, which are size and shape, color pattern, behavior, and habitat. The class is going to be me basically lecturing for the first roughly third, because it's going to be easier for me to show you things on the binoculars live. And then we're going to take a pause and we're going to do the screen share, and we're going to bring up the PowerPoint slides. And then from there, we'll continue with the rest of the class. All right, so let's get started. Tools of the trade. Stripped down to its bare minimum, what do you need for birding? Binoculars and a field guide. That's the bare minimum. That's what you're going to need. So that's where we're going to start. So let's take a pair of binoculars. Hopefully everybody brought some with them. Kristen, you got your binoculars? All right. So we're going to familiarize ourselves with the binoculars, and we're going to start from the small end and go to the big end. So not a lot of fancy nomenclature here. We're just going to keep it to the basics. This end is called the eyepiece. Obviously, it's the part that goes against your eyes. In the middle, you will have either a toggle, or more commonly, especially in better binoculars, you will have a center focus wheel. I want everybody to manipulate that wheel and loosen it up and make sure that it moves, because if your binoculars haven't been used for a while and you broke them out just for this class, it may be a little stiff, and you want to be able to move that because while you're birding, you're going to be using that a lot. All right. So that's the small end. That's the center focus wheel. The large end we call the objective lens. All right. So that's the basics of the binoculars. But there's one thing that's a little harder to locate, and this is going to be a little bit more challenging for you. We're going to locate the diopter adjustment ring, because this is going to be critical when we talk about adjusting and focusing your binoculars. Now, for most binoculars, it's at the base of the right eyepiece. If you notice on this left eyepiece, it's smooth. There are no grips. On this eyepiece, it's grooved so that I can manipulate it. So your first clue as to where it is might be those grooves. So try to find those grooves and try and find that diopter adjustment ring. And again, if it hasn't been used for a while, you might want to give it a little wiggle and make sure that it's going. Now, when you look at it, you might have a little indicator arrow or a dot, and you might have the numbers 1, 2, 3 on either side of that indicator arrow. And that can help you locate it as well. Now, in some models of binoculars, pretty rare though, it's actually located up here next to the central focus ring. But I'm hoping that most of you are able to locate yours at the base of the right eyepiece. All right, so we're going to be working with that in just a little bit. So that's why I wanted you to be able to find it easily and to loosen it up a little bit before we manipulate it later. Okay, so those are our basic binocular parts, from the small end to the big end and the diopter adjustment ring. Let's talk a little bit about cleaning and caring for our binoculars. Always start with clean binoculars. This is so important. And my birding buddies will know I kind of rag on them once in a while. I'll look at their binoculars and I'll look down at this eyepiece and I'll go, how do you see anything out of there? You got to clean those. And cleaning is so easy nowadays, thanks to a couple little products on the market. One of them is called a lens pen. So the lens pen has 2 ends. This end is the brushes. You manipulate the brushes by simply pressing on the slide bar on the side. So for cleaning and for keeping them safe, this end might have a pop cap or a screw cap, but this has a small carbon base, this little pad, which is very good at taking things like fingerprints and smudges off of the glass. Now, if your binoculars are really dirty, like you had them strapped on and you ate lunch over them and you got lunch on your lenses, you might have to do a little bit more cleaning. But the nice part is that they have these wonderful lens wipes that are available now. And along with a little microfiber cloth, or perhaps even a little bit of actual lens tissue. This is not Kleenex, not Kleenex. This is lens tissue for optics only. Then you can clean your binoculars pretty easily. So let's go over how to use all this stuff real quick. I'll use these big binoculars, makes it a little bit easier. So I'm gonna extend my brushes. I'm gonna hold my binoculars upside down. Why? Because I want the dust to fall out. If I brush them this way, it doesn't make that much sense. So hold your binoculars upside down and use the brush to clean the lens. Then I simply open up the other end of my lens pen, take out my little carbon pad, and I make circular motions starting from the center and going to the outside. And then I look at it to see if the fingerprints have been removed. Again, if it's too dirty and I need to really clean it up, I'll take one of my lens wipes. Now, the nice part about these is that they're large enough that when you open them up a couple times, then you can tear them in half. And then you have one, yeah, sure, I can tear it in half. All right, we'll open it up a little bit more. And we'll tear it in half. And then we have one for one eyepiece and one for the other. And the eyepieces are the ones that are going to get dirtier than the objective lens, because those are the ones that are facing up. They're going to collect dirt and dust, and they're going to collect your lunch if you're wearing your binoculars uncovered. You want to make circular motions with your wipe, starting from the center and going to the outside. And then the last thing you want to clean is the actual eye cup. You don't want to start with the eye cup where that dirty oil is from your face touching your eyepiece and move that into the lens. So you want to start at the lens and move your way out. Same on your larger lenses on this side. Okay. So you want to start in the center and you want to wipe to the outside. But typically these don't get near as dirty as the eyepiece. So that's the basic cleaning of a binocular. And that sounds so simple, but it's so important because looking through dirty binoculars is just no fun at all. And once they're clean, then they're ready to go. So this is so important we're going to take our first pledge of the class. All right. So everybody raise their right hand. Kristen, you too. You repeat after me. I promise
I promise
to put my binoculars away clean
to put my binoculars away clean
so they're always ready to go birding.
so they're always ready to go birding.
There we go. All right. It's really that simple. And if you make it a practice to clean your binoculars every time you come home, then they literally are always ready to go. So that's something I started a long time ago, and it's probably one of the best birding habits I ever developed. So what are some of the other do's and don'ts with binoculars? Well, you don't want to leave them in a hot car, especially if you have coatings on your lenses, because the heat can cause the lens coatings to separate. Another bad habit, and I'm guilty of this too, is I throw them in the seat beside me. And what happens if you hit the brakes? Those binoculars go flying, and there goes your investment. You don't want to crash your binoculars, even if you don't crash your car. Now, binoculars generally come with a strap, a simple neck strap like this. It can be worn over the head. Some people wear it sideways, like a cross-carry purse. And then the other option, especially if you have neck issues or if you have large, heavy binoculars, is a binocular harness. Now, what this does is goes over the shoulders, taking the weight off of the back of your neck. So if you're going to be doing a lot of birding, or if you have heavy binoculars, a harness is definitely the way to go. All right, now we're getting to the critical phase, adjusting and focusing the binoculars for your eyes and no one else's. When I teach this to people, 90% of them confess to me afterwards that they have been using binoculars as a monocular all these years. They've always just shut one eye because they can never get it to work. Well, they're binoculars for a reason, folks. We want you to use both eyes. You're going to be so happy once you know that you can get both eyes in focus. But it takes a few steps. So step number one is a question. Are you going to be wearing glasses in the field or not? Because what we're talking about here is eye relief. The distance between the glass on your eyepiece and your eyeball. That's the purpose of those cups I told you about earlier, okay? So it's pretty straightforward. If you're wearing glasses, you already have some relief, some distance between your eye and the binoculars. But if you're not wearing glasses, then you want those cups up to provide that relief, all right? So the cups up now put the glass of the eyepiece further away from my eyeball. And it keeps me from getting the natural oils that are on my eyes and eyelashes and skin onto the lens of the binocular as well. Okay, so no glasses, cups up. Glasses, cups down. Now, if you don't have the kind of cups that fold up and down, you have a style like this, where you fold the rubber back. That's all you have to do if you're going to wear them with glasses. Now, most of these with the rubber cups, though, you notice that the cup is very, very short. The cup expansion on that other pair of binoculars was quite larger. So go ahead and try these with your glasses, because there's not that much additional eye relief. If you find you're having a little bit of difficulty getting a sharp image, then feel free to peel them back. All right. So after we've adjusted our eye cups based on the question, am I wearing glasses or not? The next thing we want to do is talk about the distance between our eyes. No two people are exactly the same. So everybody pick up their binoculars and manipulate them like this. Look at that. There is that much range. I mean, it's almost a one size fits all, really. I'm sure there are some people on the planet, very, very small children, and maybe some very, very big people where their eyes don't fit. But that's a pretty significant range. So what I want you to do is to bring the binoculars up to your eyes and adjust them back and forth until you have a single image. I often get complaints, Tina, I'm seeing two rings, or my ring, I'm seeing one ring and there's an obstruction next to it. What you're doing is essentially aligning it so that you have not two images, but a single image, okay? So that's called the interpupillary distance for those of you the scientific types that like the formal vernacular, but basically it's just eye space is a simple way to think about it. Now comes the tricky part. Okay, remember that diopter adjustment ring we found? That's where we're going to go next. So with the diopter adjustment ring, the first thing we want to do is focus the binoculars one eye at a time. And we're going to start with our left eye. All right. So the best thing to do is to use a lens cap on the right eye so that you don't have to close your eye. You're just automatically looking with your left eye only. And you're going to use the center focus ring or toggle, and you're going to look out a window and you're going to find something that's high contrast, like a lettered sign. Like when you go birding, one of the best things you can do is like just a no parking sign, something as simple as that. And you're going to bring the lettering on that sign into sharp, sharp focus with your left eye. Then you're going to take that lens cap off, or you're going to have a buddy help you, and they're going to move their hand over and they're going to cover the left eye for you. And now you're looking out only through the right eye. But are we adjusting here? No, we're adjusting here with the diopter adjustment ring. Now it should already be pretty close to being in focus, but that depends on where you started. So some people that have that indicator mark, you can set it on 0 rather than the +1, 2, 3 or -1, 2, 3. Start with it on 0, then bring it up, look at that same sign, turn that diopter adjustment ring back and forth until your right eye is sharp in focus. All right. Then it's moment of truth time. You take off the lens cover, or you remove your hand, or you open your left eye and you look through both eyes and you say, oh my God, I can see it clearly with both eyes. It's an aha moment. I mean, I've taught this class often enough in person to know that people sometimes squeal with delight. I mean, they say, I've never been able to look through binoculars before and have them really, really work. So the secret is not that many people teach the diopter adjustment. And of course, that's critical to using binoculars properly. All right, some other little do's and don'ts. When you find a bird, I want you to start thinking of scanning with your eyes. You're not scanning for birds with your binoculars. You scan with your eyes first. And typically what you pick up is motion or sometimes color. You look at that and you look at what's immediately around it. Is that little bird sitting in the V of 2 branches? Is there a cluster of colored leaves nearby that you can kind of focus on? And then you do not take your eyes off of that bird. You go, I see it. And you raise your binoculars to your eyes. What do most rookies do? They go, oh, look at the bird. And they look down at their binoculars, and then they bring them up to their eyes. What happens? You lose the bird moves, it's gone. So just remember that you want to be sure and bring the binoculars up to your eyes. So scan with your eyes, not with your binoculars. Scan with your eyes first and scan with your binoculars later. And don't look down, lift the binoculars up to your eyes. All right. So what do the numbers mean? A lot of people say, well, what binoculars am I going to buy? Well, one of the considerations, let me bring this down to the camera there. Oh, the lighting's bad. But if you look generally in this area of your binoculars, you're going to see some numbers. And you're going to see numbers like 6 by 30, 8 by 42, 10 by 50. And what do those numbers mean? Well, the first number is basically the power or the magnification. And the second number is actually the size of the objective lens in millimeters. That's all that second number is. It has nothing to do with the magnification. All right. So the first number is the power or the magnification, how much bigger these superpower binoculars are going to make your vision like superhuman vision. It's the magnification that's going to allow you to see the birds, and it does not affect the weight of the binoculars. But the second number, the objective lens number, that is going to affect the weight of the binocular, because the bigger the glass, the larger the circle, the heavier the binoculars are going to be, but it also lets in more light. Think of it as like a window in a room. You've got a dark room, you tell your contractor, I want a window in here. And he'll say, well, how much light do you want in the room? Obviously, the bigger the window, the more light. And that comes in handy when you're birding in the early morning hours and in the evening, or maybe even on a cloudy, overcast day like today when the lighting isn't that good. So that's one of the advantages to having a larger objective lens. And you may also see another set of numbers that has to do with the field of view. And the field of view is simply the amount of area that you are seeing at a particular distance when you're looking through the binoculars. All right, here's the question I get asked all the time. Tina, what binoculars should I buy? Well, there's wonderful buying guides online and other review sites as well. If you Google finding the best binoculars for birding, or if you Google Audubon Binocular Guide, you're going to get wonderful buyer's guides from both the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and from Audubon. And those websites will be listed on the handout, by the way, so you don't have to write that down right now. Many guides are based on price range, which is really handy because it really reduces your range of selections. I mean, sure, if you've got an unlimited budget and you want to spend $2,500 on a pair of Swarovski binoculars, that's fine. But most of us are going to say, you know, give me something in the $300 to $500 range. Give me something. Give me the bare bones minimum for a beginning birder, and that's, you can go to that price range, and then you will see the reviews of the best binoculars for birding in that price range. So it makes it a very, very effective buying guide. Now, most agree that it's important to hold the binoculars in your hands. You got to get a feel for the weight. You got to see if they're comfortable. You got to decide if they're going to be, you know, really hanging on you, or if you need something lighter. And can you reach that center focus wheel? Can you spin it easily? Things like that. And the best way to do that is at, of course, a physical store. And locally, probably the largest selection of optics is at our Bass Pro store. But keep in mind that at Bass Pro, they're a little bit more geared towards hunting than birding, but it'll still give you an idea of how the different styles of binocular feel and what their weights are and things like that. Now, in a perfect world, pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, when we get back to normal, the optics expos at birding festivals, like the big San Diego Birding Festival or the one up in Monterey, is a marvelous opportunity to try every brand and style and shape. And the company representatives will be there, and they'll gladly hand you binocular after binocular and say, try this one, try this one. And of course, you're going to fall in love with the most expensive one because it has the clearest view, and then they'll make more money, and, you know, business is good. But really, the idea of the hands-on is kind of important. You can borrow binoculars from a friend and say, you know, let me see how those feel. Now, during the pandemic, I'd recommend that you sanitize them and, you know, those types of things, but it is a doable thing. Another thing that might influence your selection in binoculars is whether they have a guarantee or not. The chapter recently purchased a number of Vortex brand binoculars because they have a no questions asked guarantee. So if we have children birding at the garden using loaner binoculars and they drop them, they'll fix them or replace them for free. So yes, you may consider getting a lesser quality if you know that you can get it fixed. All right, spotting scopes. Spotting scopes are basically telescopes for land. Now, normally this would be on a tripod, and this is a very small one. But spotting scopes are wonderful because they can help you see and study distant birds, like wading birds in a pond way off on the other end of the marsh or something like that. And they can also bring in the detail on closer birds if they're holding still enough, long enough to look at them. The other nice thing about spotting scopes is something that's quite popular now are the phone adapters. So imagine being in the field with your spotting scope on a tripod, having an adapter on the eyepiece, and being able to attach your cell phone to the spotting scope to take really good quality pictures that are even beyond a telephoto lens. And that's called digiscoping, by the way. And so that's a consideration if you're thinking about a spotting scope. And then lastly, since we're talking about taking pictures, these little digital zoom cameras have the ability to zoom out so far that you feel like, well, not you feel, you actually see the bird almost as well, in some cases even better, depending on the strength of your scope. And they're a lot more lightweight than lugging around the scope on a tripod over your shoulder while you're birding. So digital photography is another option. Now, those kinds of cameras are not going to take cover of magazine perfect pictures, but they are going to allow you to identify the bird in the field. All right, so it's going to be time to share my screen, and I think this is a perfect opportunity to ask Kristen, do we have any questions in the chat about binoculars before I share?
Yeah, we do. So someone was asking what type of binoculars were you actually using that you were showing? What were the brand names?
These are my husband's old Bushnell 12 by 50s. They're big, they're heavy. The larger that first number, that magnification number, the harder they are to hand hold. Numbers that are good for birding are between 6 and 10. Most people have about an 8 magnification for birding binoculars. these are more like a sporting event binocular. This is what you take to the football game to watch what's going on down on the 50-yard line type of thing. Okay. This is one of my pair of birding binoculars. They're an 8.5 by 45. They're in the Nikon Monarch series. This model is no longer currently made, but they have very similar ones as well. The binoculars that I use currently, and they're in my they're in my birding bag, I didn't even bring them out, are actually some Vortex binoculars. And I went up to a 10 by 45 magnification, or 10 magnification on those, because I found that I could hand hold my 10 magnification without movement. It's difficult for some people. You have to be pretty steady to go above 10. But I was using these to count ducks on a distant pond for a Christmas bird count one year. And I thought they were just 10s. And then I read the numbers on them and I found out they were 12s. And I thought, if I can handhold 12s, I'm going to bump my regular birding binoculars up to 10. And that just makes things in the field a little bit bigger. So those, all of those are good brands, you know, Nikon, Bushnell, Vortex. I recommend you go to the buying guides and really look at what they have to say, because a lot of it is personal preference. Okay, any other questions?
There was one more question. Someone's binocular barrels, they won't move. Do some brands not have movable barrels?
Wow, that would be really unusual, because no two people's eyes are the same distance apart. They could be stuck. I'm pulling out a little, see, even these itty bitty little guys, even these open and close. We use something very similar to this for the really young children at the Girl Scouts at Camp La Casita. And you can't even adjust the focus. They have a fixed focus, you know, but they're better than nothing. I mean, they can be kept, you know, in your car or something like that. I don't know of any binoculars that don't adjust.
All right. And so can you just repeat what you mean by handhold in the field when you were talking about the size, I think?
Okay, so the larger the magnification, if it's 10x or above, it's difficult to hold them still enough that you don't lose the bird. Sometimes looking through optics is a little bit like taking your normal field of view and looking through a straw. And if you move that straw just the littlest bit, you lose the bird. And so the being able to hold them still is a personal thing. It depends on your ability to hang on to those with no movement.
Great, thank you, Tina.
Hope that explains it, yeah. Okay. All right, any other questions?
I think we're good for now, yeah.
All right, well, let me try this screen share thing. Everybody keep their technology fingers crossed. Here we go. We're gonna go that. And then we're gonna go from beginning. From beginning, there we go. That looked a little better. Yay, that looks good.
Looks great.
Are you seeing it?
Perfect.
Fantastic. All right, great. Well, once again, you know, welcome everybody. We appreciate the garden for having this little class as part of their celebration of Bird Month in the garden. And we're going to go to part 2 of tools of the trade. But since we just finished binoculars, let's look at our major reminders right here. Number 1, keep them clean. Number 2, adjust the binoculars to you. They're not for anybody else, they're for you. And if you loan them to somebody else, adjust them back to you when you get them back. We're talking about the eye cups, the space between your eyes, and that all-important diopter adjustment so that the focus is the same for both eyes. You're going to scan first with your eyes and then your binoculars, and you're going to remember to lift your binoculars up to your eyes and don't look down first. All right, tools of the trade part 2. Let's talk about field guides. So what is a field guide? How do I use it? What about electronic field guides and other phone apps versus the paper field guides? And are there any other helpful books for beginners besides a field guide? Yes, there are, and I have a couple of recommendations there. All right, this is part of my personal collection of field guides. Yeah, there's lots of different kinds, and there are lots of different sizes, and some are for the whole country, and some are for just regional areas. There's lots of different types of field guides. But really what we're talking about is if the binoculars are providing you with superhuman vision, then these field guides are your magic decoder ring to help you identify the birds. That's the way I like to think about it. One of the most fun things about birding is solving that mystery of what bird you're looking at. Taking those clues that you gather when you're looking at the bird and comparing it to your field guide, you can get a childlike sense of discovery and wonder, trying to ID your particular your particular bird. But remember that your field guide is more than a book. It's more than just a picture book. There are some words in there that I want to encourage you to read as well. So don't just look at the pictures. And please don't reach for the book too soon. Now, this is something that a lot of rookies do by mistake. They see a bird in the field and they go, oh, wow, that's so cool. I wonder what it is. And they immediately reach for their book. Then they go back to look at the bird and the bird is gone. Spend your time with the bird. There'll be plenty of time to look at the book later. All right. So what should a field guide include? What are their characteristics and contents? A field guide should be easy to use. It should be small enough that it's very portable to take out in the field. That's why it's called a field guide. And it should be accurate. It means it's timely and up to date. Now there's a little bit of a problem there because they're always changing bird names. The American Ornithological Union of Scientists gets together periodically and decides whether a species is a subspecies of another species or if it's two separate species. And so things do change periodically, and that can be really frustrating to beginners. And so yes, you do need to update your field guides periodically, which I think is wonderful for the people who print them. It's a good business to have people have to buy a new one every now and then. So when they're talking about accuracy, they do mean that you should use a book with fairly recent terminology. So if you're using your grandmother's book that's 40 or 50 years old, you might want to consider updating it. I think probably at least every 10 years at the minimum would be a good idea. So your field guide should contain three basic things. It should contain images like we have here on the right page. These happen to be digitally enhanced photographs. And we'll talk a little bit about photographs versus drawings in just a moment. It should contain written descriptions of the book, of the birds, because this is not all, you can't tell everything from just looking at a picture. You need some words to describe it as well. And then it should include the range maps. And the range maps are going to tell you the likelihood of you spotting the bird in the area you're looking at that particular time of year. All right, so how do we use a field guide? Well, field guides are arranged taxonomically. And that taxonomical organization means that birds that are closely related are grouped together. Now that allows you to easily compare them. And they're organized from the front of the book to the back of the book based on the least evolved birds, like loons, to the most highly evolved birds, like warblers, sparrows, and finches. Now, that means that they're not alphabetical. So sometimes people get a little frustrated because they open their book and they go to the beginning and they say the albatrosses should be with the A's, right? Let's see, the books are not alphabetical, but the index always is. So you can always just go to the back of your book, use your index, and then find the proper page to go look at. Go to the section of the book for the type of bird that you're seeing. And you're saying, well, Tina, I'm a beginner. I don't know anything about the types of birds. What do you mean, what families of birds? What are you talking about? You might know a lot more than you already give yourself credit for. I mean, you know the difference between a hummingbird and a duck, right? Or a gull, or what were some of those other birds mentioned? You know the difference between a gull and a roadrunner, right? So give yourself credit. You might actually know a lot more. And eventually you will come to know the major groupings or families of birds, the water birds, the wading birds, the flycatchers. But you actually know a bit more than you think you do already. So then you go to that part of the book and you find the families and you start looking for the picture of the bird that matches what you're seeing in the field. And you say, I've got it, I've got it. Not necessarily, there's one more step. You've got to check the range map to make sure that that bird is likely seen in your area. And then you're gonna read the text. Remember, it's not just a picture book, because there may be something in that text that completely eliminates your first choice for that bird identification. So let's talk a little bit about range maps. Now, range maps are color-coded to show you not only where the bird is likely to be found, but what time of year as well. Now, it's a common rookie mistake, again, to not check those range maps when you're making an ID out of a field guide. So in every map, every range map color key is different depending on the manufacturer of the book. So you want to be sure and go to the front of your book and look to see what the color coding is for your particular field guide. So I don't want you to memorize this and say, oh, red is summer and blue is winter. It may be different in your book. And field guides contain a lot more than pictures. So be sure and read the rest of your guide. There's information about looking at birds at different times of year, keeping lists, writing down your records, birding events that you can attend. There's diagrams that will show you the basic anatomy, or in this case, because we're talking about the surface of the bird, the basic topography of the bird. And so you can identify the different parts when they're mentioned in the written description of the bird. All right. Again, another question I get asked a lot. What binoculars should I buy? Tina, what field guide should I buy? Well, there's a lot of considerations, so we're going to take them just one or two at a time. And the first two considerations we're going to look at is the area of coverage. Field guides can be very local, like just your state, or in California, because it's so big, just your half of the state. They can be west of the Rockies for North America. They can be right of the Rockies, or they can be for all of North America, or national, if you will. Now, there are specialty field guides that are specific to certain types of birds. You can get guides to just hummingbirds, guides to just hawks, guides to just gulls. In fact, I'm tempted to get that one because the gulls are very hard to identify, and it's going to be a challenge for me in the future, but I'm just not quite ready to bite that bullet just yet. Here's some examples of specialty field guides. The one on the left is one that's specialized by area. This is birds to just Northern California. Often people recommend, often experts recommend to beginners that they start with a regional field guide. Living in Southern California, I don't think that's a good idea. And the reason is that we have so many birds here in Southern California that are periodic, vagrant, that show up, that belong somewhere else in the country. They just chose to hang out in the sunny Southern California winter with us. And you look in one of these specialty books by area and you're not going to see the bird. So, and then on the right, we have an example of a specialty book by type of bird. This is an entire field guide dedicated to just hawks. All right, another consideration, right smack dab here in the middle here. What do you use, Tina, or what do most experts use, or most experienced birders use? Well, there's 4 titles that are pretty well accepted as the better field guides: Sibley's, Nat Geo, Kaufman, and Peterson. Now, Sibley's, Nat Geo, and Peterson are all done with drawings or illustrations, and Kaufman's is actually done with photographs. Okay, so here's an example of 3 of those 4 big ones. I do not have a current Peterson, so I didn't include that in the photograph. You can probably tell which one I actually use in the field. It's the Kaufman on the far right with all the shipping tape on it to reinforce it because it's being pulled in and out of my backpack all the time. All right. Oh, and by the way, these are not current editions, and so you don't want to, especially of the Sibley's and the Nat Geo, they will have a different cover on them if you go on Amazon and buy one this afternoon. All right, here we go. Photographs versus drawings. I get asked this question all the time, and I actually recommend at least one of each. And here's why. Photos are usually digitally enhanced so that they show the majority of the important field markings. And if the lighting was off when the photographer took the picture, they will adjust the color so it's more true to what you might see in the field. But drawings, on the other hand, portray the birds in similar poses. So take a look at these 3 birds here. See how they're all facing the same way? They're all looking the same direction. For beginners, drawings are often better because it allows you that ability to make that quick side-by-side comparison. But sometimes when you're trying to identify a bird from a photograph, so let's say you were out in the field, you saw the bird, you say, I just can't tell what it is, but you got some decent pictures. You get home, you put your pictures up on your computer screen, you grab your book and you start looking through it and you're like, I just can't find it. Sometimes it's better to compare photographs to photographs when you're trying to identify a bird. And now, why did I choose the northern fulmar as my example bird for this particular slide? Well, of course, there's a story behind it. I was deep sea fishing in Alaska for halibut, and some of these pelagic ocean going birds started landing around the fishing boat, hoping for scraps or bait. And one of the birds that landed on the water was this little guy here. He's not that little actually, but he was little compared to the albatross, which I was able to identify right away. And I looked at him and I said, okay, you are one of the ocean-going birds known as a tube nose. Now, I can't magnify this photo, but I want you to look what I'm pointing to right here. This little extra appendage that looks like a tube above the bill, that's how birds that live at sea drink seawater and expel the extra salt. So I knew this bird was a tube nose, but I didn't know which one. Now, there aren't that many different pages of tube noses, but when I looked at the drawings in my Sibley, I just said, it's not here. I'm not seeing it. My brain said, no connection. I opened up my Kaufman's and I looked at the photograph, and instantly I said, that's it. That's the northern fulmar. Our brains look at drawings and photographs differently. And so that's why sometimes it's nice to have both. But does that mean you have to carry 2 books in the field? Heck no, because in a moment we're going to talk about phone apps. And so you can carry 1 book of one type of illustration in your backpack or pocket, and you can carry a phone app with a different one, and then you have both with you in the field. All right, last considerations on what field guide should I buy. Another option is to test drive a field drive simply by checking them out of the library. So go ahead and get 2 or 3 different brands or styles and take them home, practice on your birds in your backyard, and see which one you like. And then here's my official caution for the field guide section. Field guides can become addicting. You saw that first photo spread with all of them on there. Pretty soon, you're going to find that you're going to have one at home, you're going to have one in the car, you're going to have one at work, and then you're going to rotate, and the one in the car is going to fall apart, and so you're going to put the one from work and put it in the car. Yeah, they can become addicting. All right, let's talk about the alternate to carrying a book, electronic field guides and other phone apps that will help you ID birds in the field. Now, just like the book, the phone apps provide images, written descriptions, and range maps. But the one thing that the phone apps can do that the book can't is give you bird sounds. And we're talking about the songs and the calls that will help you identify the bird. So right away, I think you can see that there's a big advantage to having these electronic field guides and apps. Here's a few of the most popular ones. There's an Audubon phone app that's a field guide, and it's completely free. There's a Sibley phone app, which is basically the computerized version of this book. I brought up the red-tailed hawk here so you can see the similarity between the old cover of Sibley's book and the actual phone app. And one of the ones that is actually very highly rated, for those of you that are iPhone users, iBird apparently has additional information that can be very, very useful. I don't have an iPhone, so I can't speak to that personally. Sibley uses drawings, Audubon uses photographs, iBird uses photographs, and so you can decide which phone app do I want to use and which book do I want to carry, and that makes an excellent combination in the field. Let's talk about a couple other phone apps. Merlin. Oh, I wish this was around when I first started, and I only started birding about a dozen years ago, but I didn't even have a smartphone, I don't think, a dozen years ago. Merlin is an amazing bird ID tool. If you can answer 3 simple questions about your bird that you're trying to identify, Merlin will come up with a list of possible matches, and then you can compare those birds with what you're seeing in the field. So what questions does it ask? Well, first of all, because it's attached to your smartphone GPS, it knows where you are, which tells it what type of habitat. It knows the date, so it knows what time of year, so it knows whether a bird might be migrating through or not, or whether it's a resident or a visitor. And then it will ask you the relative size of the bird. Is this bird bigger than a crow, but smaller than a goose? Is it bigger than a sparrow, but smaller than a robin? And you make a choice. And then it asks you, what are the predominant colors on the bird? Well, this bird was primarily black and white and gray, and it had a little red. So you just check off black, white, gray, red. And then it asks you, what was the bird doing? Was it sitting in a tree? Was it floating on the water? Was it foraging and wading through shallow water? And you answer those questions. And then boom, it gives you a list of most likely birds to be seen in your area. To me, it feels a little bit like cheating, but you know what? If you're a beginner and it makes you learn, go for it. I mean, I have Merlin on my phone, but I confess I don't use it very often. But for beginners, I think it's a wonderful thing. And then on the right-hand side here, we have eBird. And what we're really talking about here is eBird Mobile, since we're talking about phone apps. And this allows you to find birding hotspots, to actually record your findings real time in the field. And eBird has a lot of other functions that we're going to talk a little bit later in the section on keeping records. But I just wanted to introduce the idea of eBird as another very popular and useful phone application. Okay. All right. But what about non-phone items? What about other books that might help you? These are my two recommendations. The book on the left with the pretty hummingbird on it is Sibley's Basic Birding Basics. How to identify birds using clues in feathers, habitats, behaviors, and sounds. This is a wonderful book to accompany your field guides. Another one that's kind of fun is this little one on the right, and that's called the Birdwatching Answer Book, and it's from Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I consider it a great bathroom read because it literally is in question and answer format. And so there's a single question and the answer is outlined. Now they're divided into sections. So like there might be a section on migration and you might look in there and there'll be a question like, I've heard that songbirds actually migrate at night. Is that true? And then it explains the scientific reasoning behind, or findings or whatever. It answers the question basically is what it does for you. And it's you can read it at your own pace, just one question at a time, or read a whole section at a time, or whatever you want. But it's a nice little book to have. All right. So we've been talking about all these wonderful field guides, the physical books, the helper books like this as well. But let's be clear that a bird in the field rarely looks exactly like the bird in the book. This is due to the variation between male and female, between juvenile and adult, between breeding plumage and non-breeding plumage. And so know ahead of time that you're going to experience a certain amount of frustration, that's normal for a new birder. And that the field guide depicts the bird, usually an adult bird, in perfect plumage. And let's face it, in real life, they just don't look like that. Now, Kristen, I'm going to ask you to read another little quote from this book on the left, the Sibley's Birding Basics. This is found right on page 3, paragraph 2. And I just love it because it kind of summarizes up things. And you've been listening to me talk forever. So now Kristen's going to read you a little while.
So it says, bird identification in the real world is far more than just matching a picture to a bird. The fact that the living bird is a shy and wary creature with no particular interest in being seen means that the challenge of matching the details of the bird's appearance to a picture is compounded by the challenge of seeing and interpreting the details in the first place.
I just love that. The live bird is a shy and wary creature that has no particular interest in being seen. But we, the birders, have 100% interest in seeing the bird. So if we can't always see all of the bird, how are we supposed to match what we're seeing to the perfect picture in the book? So yeah, there's a challenge there. And that's actually part of the fun of birding, is that challenge. Because as you see them in the book is not how you're going to see them in nature. All right. So based on that, knowing that you're going to have some frustration, I want you all to raise your right hand. It's time to take another oath. This is Tina's unofficial oath of birding. You ready? I will learn from my mistakes.
I will learn from my mistakes.
I accept that I will not be able to ID every bird.
I accept that I will not be able to ID every bird.
There is nothing to be gained by forcing an ID.
There is nothing to be gained by forcing an ID.
Not every ID mystery will be solved.
Not every ID mystery will be solved.
Great. All right. Give yourself a big round of applause. You are all official birders now because you've taken the oath. Now, the point is be easy on yourself. You're not going to be able to identify every bird in the field. Nobody can. Nobody can. But that's part of the fun. That's part of the challenge. All right. Let's talk a little bit about keeping records. We're going to look at field notes, birding checklists, birding diaries and personal lists, and we're going to talk a little bit more about eBird for keeping records. Here's some examples of all of that. So use my little marker here again. Ooh, there we go. So here in the upper left corner, oops, I'm sorry, I pressed a button. I went too far. I don't need to press the mouse, I just need to circle it. Up in the upper left-hand corner here, we have a couple examples of birding journals or diaries where you can actually log your sightings when you see that bird for the first time. And this creates what's known as your life list. Over here in the upper right-hand corner, we have a number of checklists. Some are local from California, and a couple of these are ones I brought back from Alaska, because sometimes when you're traveling, the bird checklist can actually be a great little souvenir. Down here in the lower right-hand corner, I have some examples of keeping a yard list. So when I first started, I just started marking down all the birds that we saw in our backyard. Based on the year, I would start in January, and then every time I'd see a new species, I would just keep adding to the list by month. But you can do it any number of ways. And now that I know the basic 50 or so species that regularly visit my backyard, I just keep a list of new ones that come in and talk about what time of year it was and whether the tree had recently been trimmed or anything else that might influence why I saw that bird at that particular time. And then these little guys over here, these are examples of what I actually carry in the field with me when I'm taking notes. All right. So is taking field notes and keeping records while birding a requirement? No, it's not. But it certainly will speed up the learning process, and it can provide you with new incentives to get outside and go birding and have more fun. Isn't that what it's all about? So let's start with field notes. Field notes, in their bare bones essence, you would include information like the date and time and location, the name of the species that you're seeing, the sex if you could figure it out, and the quantity of birds that you're seeing. But see, I think field notes should have more oomph, more fun. And so some of those extras that you might want to put in is who you were with, to remember what trip that was and what was the weather like. You might want to include notes about how bad the bugs were, so that you know next time you go there and plan a future trip, you bring more repellent. Or maybe where the best parking places were at that particular trailhead or wherever it is that you're going. Now, if you see a new bird, note the field marks. And this is a good one here. Draw a picture, even if it's like a little stick figure, and you just make a mark that says, okay, it had red up here on its head, it had a black line through its eye, and its throat was white. Just even the simplest drawings really enhance the learning process. So I strongly encourage you, if you see a bird for the first time, take field notes that include a little drawing of that bird as well. Now, some of the other things that are kind of fun is, depending on where you're birding, you can include local nicknames. So when I was down in Mexico one time, I wasn't even a birder then, but I enjoyed birds, but we went on a shore excursion that included a trip through an estuary. And they call blackneck stilts Charo Mexicano down there in Mazatlan. And so I included that in my notes because it was a local nickname for a bird. And I just thought that was kind of quick. And it helped me remember what I'd seen and where. You can add comments about behavior and habitat. And here's something that's kind of fun. Even if you've seen that same bird a zillion times, but you observe a behavior that you've never seen before, like maybe they're doing a courtship dance for the first time. Well, that's certainly noteworthy. Now, if you've forgotten your field guide, taking notes is really important, because then you might want to include information about how the bird was feeding. So I didn't have my field guide with me. I took my dog for a walk, but I decided to grab my binoculars at the last minute. And I happened to see a shorebird with relatively long legs and a relatively long bill, and it was probing the mud up and down like a sewing machine action. Now, I didn't use those terms when I was looking at it, but I did make a note probing the mud. And I also made a note that the bill was about the same length as the legs. And with those two bits of information, I was able to go to my field guide and find that a long-billed dowitcher probes like a sewing machine. And when I read those words, it's like, oh my God, the sewing machine needle. Yeah, that's exactly what I was seeing. And it made sense, and it helped me ID the bird. So noting behavior can be important. Once again, making all these different field notes, drawing these pictures, they speed the learning process, and they really enhance your enjoyment as well. So here's some checklists. On the right, we have a couple local ones, one from Benelli Park, and the soon to be updated one for the California Botanic Garden. This one obviously still says the Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden, so it's a little bit out of date. We're working on trying to bring the garden a new updated field guide, checklist rather. So birding checklists are lists of birds for a given area, and they're usually with checkboxes so that you can easily record what you saw. Now, one of the disadvantages to them is that they are in taxonomic order and they don't have an index. So you kind of have to know what order the birds are in. Using checklists can actually help you learn that taxonomic order of birds. The frequency of the occurrence of the birds based on the season, usually spring, summer, fall, and winter, is often listed as part of their abundance, whether they're common, uncommon, rare, or accidental species. Sometimes a checklist will let you know if the bird nests in that area, which is also kind of nice, especially if you're touring that area during breeding season. But once again, the disadvantage is they are not alphabetical, they are taxonomic, and so you do have to keep that in mind. Now, sometimes you can go to a location and look on their website and download and print the checkoff list before you go. You can also get checklists off of eBird, which is something we'll talk about in just a moment. All right, I think this is a good place to pause. Oh, no, I'm sorry, we got a couple more slides. I'm bad. Birding diaries and life lists. You can use the life list that's actually in the back of your field guide. Many field guides include a checkbox listing where you can check off the bird, and some even have the room to write the date. But if you do that, don't lose your field guide, because there goes your list. So there are many nice diaries that are available. One of the nicer ones right now is from Cornell. But if you Google birding diaries, they'll come up with all kinds of different ones. And they make good gifts too if you have birding friends. So think about those life list type diaries as a possible gift. Now, keeping a list. A lot of people ask, well, am I supposed to keep a list? What kind of list do I keep? There's many different kinds of lists, but the point is that you decide. You decide what kind of list that you want to keep. Now, the most common are a life list, pretty self-explanatory. Every bird that you've seen in your lifetime. There's yard lists, like the little index cards that I showed you in that first photograph. You might keep a list of the birds that you see each year, or you can do it by area. You can be very, very local, perhaps even your city or your county, perhaps the whole state. And once you start traveling internationally to bird, then you're going to want to keep lists for each country that you visit. And this list can be manual or they can be electronic. But keeping a list does indeed help you learn the names of birds. It helps you learn how to spell the birds' names, which is something that's kind of nice. And I think it is a good record of where you've been and what you've seen. All right, let's talk a wee bit about eBird. eBird is global tools for birders, and they provide critical data for science. In a nutshell, eBird is a free online program that allows birders to track their sightings, search hotspots, create checklists. The database is managed by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it provides scientific researchers, amateur naturalists, all kinds of different people with real-time data of bird observations. It also provides real-time data about bird distribution and abundance. So you can record the birds that you see, you can keep track of your own personal bird lists, you can explore dynamic maps and graphs that show you where the birds are migrating when. You can print checklists if you're going to a particular area. You can find birding hotspots when you're traveling. You can have an idea of where you might want to go birding while you're on that business trip. And you can share your sightings and join the eBird community. And by sightings, that also means now you can share your photographs and your audio recordings, and they become part of eBird. All right, now's the time to pause. So we have some questions, Kristen?
Not quite. You had mentioned Bird Month, and somebody asked what Bird Month was, and I just wanted to say Bird Month is just here at the garden. We normally have our family bird festival during the month of February, and it coincides with the Great Backyard Bird Count that is through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and eBird. So that kind of fits perfectly. And so we're just doing, like this class here and other bird-friendly activities throughout the month of February in lieu of that in-person event. So that's what Bird Month was. But we have, where could we find the Benelli Park checklist?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure if that's available online or not. I'll have to check. I think we had it on our webpage at one point. I'll have to double check that. Normally I would say, when you come birding at Benelli, the trip leader, Rod Higbee, the author of that checklist, will give you one. But unfortunately, because of COVID, we're not having group activities like that just yet. So I will research that and get you an answer on that, Kristen, and find out if it's available online or not.
Great, thank you.
You can always print a birding checklist through eBird based on everyone's sightings, but it may not include quite as much information as Rod's little personal checklist there that he developed after birding there for years and years and years and years. All right, is it time to move on to bird identification?
Yeah, there's a question about the Great Backyard Bird Count, but maybe we can hold that to the final like question
Okay,
and answer section. Okay.
alrighty, that'll work. Yeah, because I hope to have time to talk a little bit about citizen science, and I included references for the Great Backyard Bird Count in the handout that um, Kristen will be able to email to you.
Great.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to the 4 keys of bird identification. Now, a little disclaimer here. I'm going to confess almost all of this information I stole from the Cornell series called Inside Birding. These are 4 wonderful little birding videos that are only 10 minutes long each. This is your homework assignment. All right, all my guests here today, I didn't start the class with a test like I usually do, so be glad for that, but I am giving you homework. And your homework is to watch these 4 videos online from Cornell. You can even just go to YouTube and put in Inside Birding and they'll pop right up. So the first one is on size and shape. The second one is on color pattern. The third one is on behavior. And the fourth one is on habitat. Now these videos include incredible graphics that are so well done and a lot of videos and animation that I can't begin to replicate on this simple Zoom 1-hour program today. But I really encourage you to follow up with this by viewing those online. I think you'll find it really beneficial. All right. So now that you know a little bit about the tools of the trade, let's learn about how to actually watch birds. We all start out pretty much the same, seeing those beautiful birds in our backyard, appreciating their beauty, and wondering what birds are we actually seeing? Because if we want to know more about them, then we got to know what they are. And that's kind of where it all starts. So the first step in solving the mystery of a bird is the bird's identification. Now, this is not about memorizing your field guide. Don't attempt that. What it's about is knowing what to look for and to listen for, and how to record what you see. And once again, the 4 major keys to bird identification are size and shape, color pattern, behavior, and habitat. So let's talk about size and shape. Now, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to get in the habit of talking to yourself. Now, people are going to say, are you nuts or am I nuts? Wait a minute. The teacher told me to talk to myself? Yes, I'm telling you, talk to yourself, because you want to compare the bird you're trying to identify with common birds that you already know. And that's going to help you get the bird into a general family, like, you know, the difference between a hawk and a duck. And then you're going to also compare that bird to itself. I'll show you how in just a moment. And the main thing that you're going to note is the overall shape or silhouette of that bird. So using all of these techniques, you're going to be able to really get a jump on identifying the bird. All right, so what do I mean by comparing the size of the bird to other birds? You're going to be talking to yourself now, and we'll use an American goldfinch as our example. Now, the American goldfinch is 4.5 to 5 inches. So you're going to say to yourself, okay, I've got this pretty little bird. I don't know what it is, but I think it might be a songbird because it's perched and it's singing. I know it's bigger than a hummingbird and it's smaller than a robin. That's what you do. You just compare the bird to other birds that you're familiar with. And you say it to yourself, or even out loud if nobody's listening, or if you don't care if other people listen, to help you kind of talk yourself through the bird ID. Now you can also compare the bird to itself. This is one of the biggest ID challenges in woodpeckers. On the left, we have a downy woodpecker, and on the right, we have a hairy woodpecker. And in the video, you'll see them in full color, you'll see them in video. But for right now, I want you to just kind of grasp the concept of comparing the bird to itself. I mentioned that I saw that dowitcher, and I noted that the bill was about the same length as the legs. Well, I didn't have any other birds nearby to compare it to, and I didn't have a ruler that I could run up to the bird and hold. And so I had to kind of find something relative. So the beauty of comparing a bird to itself is it's always there. You don't need that nearby other bird of the similar species. You don't need a ruler nearby. You're comparing the bird to itself. So in this case, if you took the bill of this smaller billed bird, this downy woodpecker on the left, and you turn that bill around 180 degrees, it would just barely go past the bird's eye. But if you took the long bill of this hairy woodpecker and you spun it around 180 degrees, it would go well past the bird's eye and tell you right away that you're dealing with the bird with the longer bill. Because the hairy is larger overall, but without the downy next to it, and looking at it at a distance through binoculars, size becomes a relative thing. So comparing a bird to itself is a wonderful technique as part of overall size and shape evaluation. Because this right here does not happen in nature very often. Now what we have is the two species that are different that are actually side by side. Now Rod Higbee caught this photograph, or took this photograph at Benelli. He caught this least sandpiper on the left, standing right next to the western sandpiper on the right. So take a look at these two birds and tell me what you see that is different. They sure look a lot alike to me. Overall, I'd say that the one on the right is bigger, and it is. But look at the color of the legs. Do you notice any difference there? Look at the size and the thickness of that bill. Do you notice any differences there? So these are the kinds of things that we want to look at in the field. And if this bird was standing out of the water and you could see the full length, you could do like I did with the dowitcher and kind of say, well, that bill was so long, it was about the same length of the leg. Or maybe the bill was shorter and it wasn't even as tall, or as long as the bird was tall. If you read the written description for these birds, the written description will often include that a winter western sandpiper has a brownish streak on the feathers that cover the shoulder, which are called the scapulars. It will note that the bill is thicker and that it is slightly droopy at the end. The written description will tell you that the least sandpiper has the shorter and narrower, finer bill, and that the legs are usually yellow or greenish in color. So that's why it's important to read and not just look at the pictures, because you're going to get additional information. So we wish Mother Nature was like this photo all the time, where you get the two species side by side and you can make that quick comparison, but it rarely happens. But that was so special, I thought I'd share that special moment. All right, let's talk about color pattern a little bit. One of the things that you want to do with color pattern is that you want to inventory the major body parts and their color. Because more important than color alone, color pattern gives us additional information. And again, I want to discourage you from trying to match up the bird in the book with the bird in the field, because they're never going to match exactly. So what you want to do is ignore some of the subtleties and take an overall look at the bird and their color pattern. So if we were just to describe and inventory the major body parts and their colors on these two birds on the right, which are two different species, by the way. This was photographed in my backyard last spring when we were all at home and had more time to enjoy the birds in our yard. Overall, I'd say that we have orange birds with black heads and a bit of white accent on the wing. But there's more to it than just that. Look at the color of the eye of this bird versus the color of the eye of that bird. Major difference there in terms of color and pattern. This bird, his head is completely black. This one is mixed a little black and orange. This bird has a beautiful white wing bar. This bird has large, what you might call wing patches of white. And so those are the kinds of things that you want to look at. And why do we focus our attention on the head and the wings? Because the birds are perpetually in motion, and you may not have a chance to evaluate the overall body. So because these are photographs and we have the time, we could say that this bird has predominantly black head, orange body, long black tail. It has white on the wings and white on the belly. But if we see that spotted towhee working the leaves in the garden underneath a big oak tree in the shadows, there's a good chance that we may not be able to identify all of that. So what we want to focus on is that wing pattern and the head, because that's where most of the markings are. Now, the head parts that we're going to look at are the crown, the supercilium, the eye ring, and the eye line. But these particular birds don't have any of those. So we're going to look at these birds instead. So looking at the head parts of these two different sparrows, we get to learn the nomenclature of some of the most important field markings. And those are the eye line, the eye ring, the crown, and the supercilium. So the crown is, in this case, a solid color brown. This is an immature white-crowned sparrow, by the way. And this is a white-throated sparrow, fully mature. And inside that crown, it also has a crown stripe. So this little guy on the left, when he grows up next year, he's going to actually have a head that looks very much like this. And that's why they're called white-crowned sparrows. You might look at this brown and say, why is this called a white-crowned sparrow? Because the immature bird has a solid brown crown. So the crown is an excellent place to look. The eye ring, well, the eye ring is the area that encircles the eye. It can be either the color of the skin or the color of the feathers, but if it contrasts against the color of the feathers around it, then that can be a wonderful field mark to look at. And the eye line usually occurs both in front of and behind the eye, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just basically a line through the eye. Now the supercilium, that's your one vocabulary word for this lecture. The supercilium can also just be called the eyebrow. It's the area above and behind the eye. Okay, so those are the parts of the head that you want to look at on color pattern. So now we're going to compare a couple of Orioles. These are two different species. And if I was to look at this bird quickly in the field, I would say that I had a black and orange bird with some white on the wings. That might be all I see, and then I'm not really sure what I've got. So again, we want to focus on the heads and we want to focus on the wings. Now this bird has a nice black crown. He's got a nice black eye line. He also has a black throat, which makes him very different than the head of this bird. This bird has a white wing bar that's pretty distinctive, and it's just a single bar. This bird's wing bar is huge and might actually be called a wing patch. Does anybody know what birds we have? Any guesses, Kristen? I'm putting you on the spot.
I'm not sure.
Well, this is.
I have a guess in the chat for a Baltimore Oriole.
Pardon?
A Baltimore Oriole.
The Baltimore Oriole on the left, and do we know which one's on the right? This is a Bullock's Oriole. So this is the bird you would see back east, and this is kind of his West Coast cousin, if you will. But it was a nice photo that I found online because it included the wing bars and the head, and it gives you an idea of why it's important in the field to focus on the markings, the color patterns on the head and the wings. All right. The next thing we want to look at is behavior. Watching the way birds behave is often what attracts us to birding in the first place. I mean, it's a lot of fun to watch bird behavior, but more than that, it's a reliable indicator of identification. Why? Because behavior is very consistent and unchanging within a species. A goose flies like a goose. A pipit walks like a pipit. So learning bird behavior can actually be an asset in bird identification. So you want to look at things like posture, you want to look at foraging behavior, and you want to look at flight style. And in that posture, you want to look at where they're perching and how. For the foraging behavior, you want to look not just where and how, but also what they're foraging, what they're eating. And on the flight style, you want to focus on the wing beats and the directness of the flight. So let's look at some examples here. Posture. Where is your bird and what is its preferred perch? Because that's pretty much species specific, and that's kind of a good thing. Is your bird wading in shallow water? Is your bird sitting upright, perched in a tree, or is your bird down on the ground? Now, remember when we talked about size and shape and the overall silhouette? I chose this picture of a California quail on the ground because I wanted you to recognize that this bird is not its normal shape. What's happening here is the bird is responding to cold weather. And in cold weather, birds can fluff up their feathers to completely change their silhouette. So one thing you want to be careful of when you're birding just by shape or silhouette is the temperature. Is that bird normally shaped like that? Or is it all puffed up to try and stay warm? So that's why I chose this photograph for that reason. So the posture, you want to look at how the bird is perched. Is it upright or is it more horizontal? And what types of behaviors are you likely to see while it's perching? In other words, does it have repetitive body motions? Is it bobbing its tail? Is it dipping its tail? Does it bob its head? These are all behaviors that you can watch while the birds are in posture, while you're watching their posture, I should say. All right, next up is foraging behavior. Is the bird hanging upside down on a seed head? Is the bird wading through water? Is the bird at the tip of a branch? Where is it foraging? How is it foraging? Is it foraging off the surface of the water? Is it probing in the mud? Or is it probing in the bark of the tree? Is it flying out and grabbing insects in midair? Is it scratching on the forest floor? Ask yourself, what kind of food might that bird be foraging for? The most likely answers are going to be insects, fish, seeds, or fruit. And lastly, we want to talk a little bit about flight style. And flight style can be demonstrated much better in a video format. So again, I encourage you to do your homework and watch those 4 10-minute videos from Cornell. But flight style is where we want to focus on the wing beats and the directness of the flight. Does the bird hover and then plunge? Does the bird soar? Are its wings beating strongly and rapidly? And when it's gliding, are the wings held flat, or are the wings in a bit of a V shape? So are they flat like a hawk, or are they V-shaped like a vulture? That's one of the easiest ways to tell the difference between that big dark bird that you see flying overhead. So behavior is very important in identifying birds. Next up is habitat. Habitat and distribution are 2 of the most frequently overlooked clues to bird identification. Most birds evolve in a specific habitat, and that habitat can be a signature characteristic just as much as the bird's song or that color pattern that we've already talked about. So ask yourself, what species might I expect to find in this habitat, in this part of the country where I am birding right now, at this time of year? We must consider the time of year because of migration. Bird habitat can be divided into 4 major categories: forested lands, aquatic lands like lakes and ponds, swamps and marshes, open oceans and shorelines, scrub and shrub, like the short woody plants that we characterize with the chaparral or the Great Basin, and open habitats, which include grasslands, agricultural fields, and tundra. Now, lucky for us in Southern California, we have such a variety of habitats. In fact, did you know that Los Angeles is actually the birdiest county in the whole world? I'm sorry, not the whole world, in the whole country. And it's because of our many habitats. I'm sure you've heard the expression, where else in the world can you go skiing and surfing in the same day? Southern California. Why? Because we have habitats that range from open ocean to coastal habitats and estuaries. We have inland valleys. We have coastal shrub and chaparral on our foothills. We have mountains that include both coniferous and deciduous forests. And we have the deserts, which are both high and low desert styles. So we have this wide variety of habitat, and that means a wider variety of birds. And that's why we're some of the birdiest areas of the whole country right here in Southern California. All right. Now the 5th key to birding, is sort of the unofficial 5th key, would be bird song. Or I should say bird sound, because bird sound includes both songs and calls. Start with the birds in your backyard and build your skill up from there. So what's the basic difference between a call and a song? Well, calls are usually the more complex vocalizations that are associated during the breeding season, when the male is either trying to attract a female to his territory or tell other males to stay away. It's usually very sing-songy and melodic and pretty. And a call, on the other hand, has a different function. They're little short chips and trills and sometimes whistles and chirps that are produced by both sexes any time of the year, and they help the family stay in touch, what we sometimes call contact calls. They can be a warning that there's a predator in the area. They can be used to scold off invaders, or even, as the babies will, a signal as begging for food. So it's a signal, feed me, feed me. A little different than the actual song of the bird. So the main difference is the calls are shorter and usually less musical. And some birds are so similar that the best identifier of a species is actually the call note and not the song. So bird songs can best be learned by these wonderful apps that you have on your phone now. If you're going to an area and you hope to see a particular bird, but you know you'll probably hear it before you see it, you can play the song of that bird on your way to your destination so that when you get there, you know what to listen for. So again, start easy, start with your backyard and build your skills from there. All right, we did have a question about citizen science projects. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the Great Backyard Bird Count at this point.
Yeah, so let me see. So someone's wondering, how does the backyard bird count work, and where are the results reported to a larger source?
Okay. Well, as you had mentioned, Kristen, the Great Backyard Bird Count is sponsored by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and all of the data actually goes into eBird. But it's a wonderful way to get people in the habit of recording their sightings, and to do that electronically either on their desktop computer after they make a note in writing, or they can carry their phone around and do it real time on their phone using the new mobile app. It's been around for a number of years. It's always held on President's Day weekend. It occurs over the course of 4 days. You can count for as little as an hour or for as much as 4 days. You can use just your backyard, or you can go to a birding location. A lot of people expand out from their yard and count the birds in the immediate neighborhood, perhaps select a nearby park. The cool part is it's happening right now. So they already have a day and a half worth of data. So if you can go to the website and actually watch like the numbers rolling in, and it's pretty amazing just how many tens of thousands of people participate and actually enter their bird sightings. It's fun, it's free, it's easy. You can download bird lists for your area if you need a little help trying to figure out what you might find in your local park. I have statistics from a few years ago. In 2013, they went international for the first time, and they got 134,935 checklists, and they ID'd over 3,000 species of birds. Now, it's way more than that. But again, your sightings, just even your backyard bird sightings, will contribute to science and allow future decisions to be made with good information about the presence of species and how climate change and other things are affecting those species and where they live. I hope that kind of answers most of the questions.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I just want to throw in one little bit here because we have time, and that's about birding ethics. Unfortunately, one of the consequences of the great popularity of birds is the negative impact that it has on the birds themselves. And so the principal ethical rule of birders should be to have no such negative impact on birds. So even the very places that have been set aside for birds, such as sanctuaries, the constant pressure from birders can actually have a detrimental effect on the birds. So if you're approaching birds and they adopt an upright and alarmed posture, it's time to back off and let them relax. Be especially conscious of your actions during breeding season and migration, because those two activities consume so much energy that the extra time and energy that they spend making sure that you're not a predator could better be used feeding their babies or migrating a little bit further so that they get to their destination on time. So everybody, I hope you'll promise to be an ethical birder as well. And remember that the best teacher is experience. So get out there with some experienced birders just as soon as this pandemic will allow us, and gain some experience on your own. All right. I'm going to use a summary that I actually got from a Nature Conservancy magazine. Nature Conservancy interviewed one of their own geographers, an avid birder named Tim Boucher, and he said that you can become a birder in 3 easy steps. And step number 1 is to gear up. Now, what do we talk about a lot today? We talked about binoculars and field guides. So to get started, get yourself a decent pair of binoculars that is designed for birding and not looking at sporting events, or one of these little, junior guys. I mean, these are good in a pinch, but you don't want to be using these full time for birding. That's for darn sure. And then get yourself a field guide or 2, perhaps download some of those free apps for your phone, and select one of the good field guides, perhaps Nat Geo or Sibley's or Kaufman's or Peterson's. Then you want to practice identifying the birds. And to do that, the most important thing is to learn those basic bird groups or bird families. And again, a good place to start is right in your own backyard. But ask yourself these simple questions. What's the bird's size and shape? What's it doing? Are there any definitive marks or colors? What sound is it making? Those are the kinds of things that you want to do to help identify the bird. And the last bit of advice that Tim Boucher had was to go with a group. And I do have to agree with this. Again, we can't do this right now because of the pandemic, but your local Audubon chapter, nature centers, your bird stores, um, botanic gardens, like the California Botanic Garden, during non-pandemic times, offer free bird walks so that you can get out there and learn from other people who have experience. And again, there's lots of online opportunities, and there's online forums where you can share photographs and you can learn from other people's pictures, and you can ask questions, and you can take your birding to the next level. The most important thing is just to take your time, walk slowly and quietly, look and listen. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tina. That was amazing. So informative and so thorough. It was, I think people really got a lot out of it. I'm seeing comments in the chat about that. At this time, I guess if we have any other questions, we can address some of those. I do see somebody asking, is there a best time of the day to go birding, would you say?
Well, in most cases, it's mornings. If we're talking about primarily songbirds, the small birds that you would see in your backyard. But sometimes, if it's like owling, you want to do it in the evening. And if you're headed to the coast or an estuary or a marsh, a lot of those birds are active all day long. They may not be actively feeding, but they're there. They don't go hide in the trees. They're still kind of out in the open and easy to see. So you will still see, egrets and herons and gulls and terns and birds like that during midday versus the little songbirds, which tend to take a little break during the middle of the day. So definitely mornings. If you're going to be a birder, you need to be a morning person. Yeah.
Great. And so what about, should you sit in the same place in your yard every time you bird? Is that something?
I move around my yard, but there is such a thing as called the big sit, where you sit in one location and you simply record everything you see and hear from that single location. I think it's a wonderful challenge. And in non-pandemic times, it was very rare for people to just sit still and enjoy nature. And so challenge yourself to do it both ways. That's what I would recommend.
Great. And did we have any other additional questions? Yeah, well, getting lots of wonderful comments in the chat. Somebody says they finally understand their binoculars, so that's wonderful.
Another aha moment. Yay!
Yeah.
I love it.
And like Tina mentioned, the Great Backyard Bird Count is going on this weekend until the 15th. So now you all have the tools. They have tips and tricks of how to get out there and contribute to that citizen science project. So I encourage you all to do so. And I think with that, thank you, Tina, so much for this wonderful presentation. It was amazing, so informative. I feel prepared myself to go out. And I hope that everyone at home feels prepared also. Like we mentioned in the beginning, this will be recorded and available on the California or CalBG website and should be up soon, definitely by the end of Monday. And I will be sending you that follow-up email with all of Tina's links that she sent me in a document. So you'll have all those websites and books and references shortly. And I think with that, that's our class for today. Thank you again, Tina.
I want to say thank you again, Kristen, on behalf of the Pomona Valley Audubon Society, the garden, and myself. Thank you to all the guests who came today. Really appreciate you supporting the garden during this pandemic time and creating a wonderful new event for Bird Month for the garden. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I encourage you all to go and check out Pomona Valley Audubon's website as well and sign up to become members there and join in your local chapter. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.